Let's continue. As we finish our discussion of how the need for communication develops, we should consider what happens after adolescence. The answer, of course, is that it depends greatly on the individual. But there are several important examples worth mentioning. The need for communication is one of those human needs that can reveal a great deal about a person's personality. There are people who might be called communication gourmets, individuals who seem almost insatiable in their desire to interact with others. The comparison is similar to someone who overeats. There is no biological necessity to communicate with such intensity, nor is there any social expectation that requires it. When the need for communication becomes excessive, it often tells us something significant about the person's inner psychological life. But there is another example that deserves equal attention. Sometimes people intentionally or unintentionally withdraw from communication. They distance themselves from social contact. Here it is useful to distinguish between two concepts that are often confused: loneliness and solitude. Loneliness, in this context, is connected with occupying a particular social position. It may describe someone who becomes an outcast or even a misanthrope, like the central figure in Molière's famous play, The Misanthrope, which later inspired Griboyedov's Woe from Wit. A person who deliberately places themselves outside society is still taking a social position. Even intentional isolation remains a way of relating to society, and personal development continues within that position. Solitude, however, is something much more subtle. A famous example is the great 20th century French writer Marcel Proust. By ordinary social standards, Proust appeared to be an extreme recluse. He spent nearly all of his time indoors and often left his home only at night. Even with close friends, he communicated very rarely, frequently choosing to write letters instead of meeting them in person. The room where he lived and worked remained closed to almost everyone. After his death, people entered that room and discovered a simple writing desk covered with stacks of school notebooks. Marcel Proust died shortly after placing the final period on his monumental novel In Search of Lost Time. Did Marcel Proust communicate with others? And if he did, then with whom? The answer may sound a little dramatic, but in this case, the emphasis is justified. He communicated with humanity. He communicated with the future readers of his novel. Many of his contemporaries failed to understand his work. Yet as the decades passed, generation after generation found new meaning in his writing. In that sense, Proust was communicating not only with the people of his own time, but with us as well. He speaks to us through the text he created, through his novel, and more broadly, through the cultural work he left behind. This leads us to an important idea. Personal communication can exist as a dialogue through cultural creations. Direct social contact is not always necessary. If there is a book, a work of art, or any meaningful cultural object, it can become the medium through which genuine personal communication takes place. Finally, it is worth returning to a figure we mentioned earlier, Robinson Crusoe. On the surface, Robinson Crusoe appears to be completely isolated. As a social individual, stranded on a deserted island, he has no human contact at all. Yet, as a personality, he remains deeply engaged in communication. He continues a dialogue with the world of culture. Why does Robinson Crusoe survive? Not simply because he is physically strong, but because he continues to interact with the cultural knowledge humanity has already created. He rebuilds tools. He recreates technology. He restores the practical achievements of civilization using the few objects he managed to save. Through those cultural creations, he preserves not only his life, but also himself as a person.